Hey, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, SPC-209. I am once again your interpersonal communications instructor, Vic McInnes, coming to you live on tape from the centrally located campus of Aiken Technical College in the heart of the bustling, thriving Graniteville, South Carolina metropolitan area. Never forget, Aiken Technical College, your number one choice for higher education in Aiken County, South Carolina. Hey, class. In case you haven't noticed, I'm trying different camera angles. The last time I recorded lectures in my classroom, you remember when we came to classrooms, right? It was not like blasting sunshine all the time outside. It was like overcast. So I'm trying to adjust a little bit to see if I can get some better camera work done here. And I think moving it closer a little bit, you'll see less of me, but when is that a bad thing? So hopefully this will be better and you'll be able to see what I'm writing on the board a little bit better. Hey, today, we're going to be talking about interpersonal communications. Yeah, it's chapter 6. We're finally getting to the subject of the course. So usually I can understand why a textbook, an author would do that. You got to lay some certain basic groundwork, but I think we've already launched into the stuff of interpersonal relations. I've actually debated on multiple occasions moving this chapter forward, but I've decided, why bother? We'll get to it. It'll be fine. Really, what we're going to be talking about today is relationships. Okay? And we'll get to that in a minute. So the question the textbook asks is, why do we even bother to study interpersonal communications? And having asked a lot of students over a long period of time why you study interpersonal communication, the answer is uniformly the same. In almost every case, you study it because it's a requirement, okay? And I get that, I understand. But remember, let's go back to our very first lecture when we talked about communication competence. Okay, interpersonal relationships and studying interpersonal communications is the basic core of communications competence. And if you have more communication competence, it's been proven over and over again, you're going to be more successful, not only professionally and materially, you're going to make more money, but also you will understand relationships more. So it generally gives people a thought that if you look at the people who are happy, if you look at the people who think they have successful relationships, they have high communication competence. They go hand in hand. So studying interpersonal communications and the way we use them to maintain those relationships is essential. Remember this. All of our relationships, let me say this again. All of our relationships, any relationship you can think of, mother, child, parent, child, boss, subordinate, friends, coworkers, colleagues, all of our relationships are defined by the nature of the interpersonal communication between the two participants. Okay? All of the relationships we have are defined by the nature of the interpersonal communications between the participants. That's why this study is so important. And that's why even if you don't think you're ever going to sit down and have to know the stages of problem solving, which we're going to go through today, even if you're never going to use that, having this as part of your communication competence toolbox makes you a more effective communicator. It makes you a more successful person. Okay? So let's ask the most basic question. Why do we communicate? Why do we communicate with other people? Think about it for a second. We don't have to. We don't have much of people that are recluses, that don't have many conversations with people, that sort of stick to themselves. It used to be, we don't have them very much anymore because of the nature of our culture and our societies, but it used to be there were hermits, People that would go to the mountains and remove themselves from interpersonal communication and remove themselves from human contact and live their lives that way. Why do we communicate with people in 21st century America? Well, the first thing that I like the fact that the author defines it as the DTR talk. We communicate to define our relationships. To define our relationships. Okay? Sometimes you need to look at somebody and explicitly say, hey, listen, what kind of a relationship do you think we actually have? Okay? That's not our relationship. Let me explain to you the nature of our relationship. I had that conversation. I had when I was down in Tampa, I had a very young Navy petty officer working for me who would used to come in on Mondays and give the most horrific details of what he had done over the weekend. And usually I sort of sat back and I didn't engage. I just sort of let it go. But he came in late one Monday morning and he started giving me all the details of all the members of the opposite sex that he had met and what had happened. And about a minute and a half, 2 minutes into it, I looked at him and I said, define the nature of our relationship for me. And he went, well, we're friends. And I went, so while I am friendly and I do care about you, we're not friends. And that's not the conversation you should be having with your boss, ever. Okay? We also do that all the time in much smaller ways. Okay? When we transition from coworkers to move someone from our work network to our social network outside of work. Sometimes we have to have a conversation about that sometimes. Like I've told you before, I go by outside of work, I go by my middle name. One of the conversations I used to have with people when they transitioned from my work network to my friends network was that, okay, you get to call me by a different name now. Okay, you're going to hear people calling me by my middle name. Don't freak out. That was one of the ways I defined our relationships. Okay? We communicate to gain compliance. We communicate to gain compliance. It often starts with the phrase, can you come help me move on Saturday? Can you move your car? Can you turn that damn music down so we can all get some sleep? Okay? We use communications to get people to do things we need them to do that is advantageous to us. We communicate to achieve a relationship goal. We communicate to achieve a relationship goal. We either routine maintenance, hopefully, the way we did it within my family, growing up, and then I carry this over with my children, was we had dinner together every night. And if you weren't there at 6 o'clock when dinner hit the table, you better have a damn good excuse that was prearranged. And that was how we maintained our relationships in my family, between my parents and myself and my brother. And I continued that down with me, my wife, and my two daughters until they went off to college. We had dinner together every night of the week unless there was a special exception. Okay? We can celebrate an achievement within a family. Going out for a graduation dinner. Or within a group or relationship. Okay? How many of y'all have gone out for your 1 month dating anniversary dinner? I never did that, and I haven't dated in 30 plus years now. Okay? We can have, as an achievement, acknowledgement of a loss. A goal of the funeral is for you to go and acknowledge the loss of your friend or family member. or acknowledge the loss of a friend or to a friend or family member. You know, I have been to memorial services, I've been to funerals where I didn't know anyone. But it was important as part of a corporate relationship. And by corporate, I mean organizational, and we'll discuss corporate culture later on. As a group, for me to be there to show solidarity with the grieving person. And that was my goal. Eventually, if you don't do these things, that will redefine the nature of your relationship. For those of y'all who are married, for those of y'all who've been in long-term relationships, if you don't ask your partner for weeks at a time, hey, how's your life going? That will eventually become the definition of your relationship. So when we talk about achieving relationship goals, lack of action or lack of a decision is oftentimes a decision in and of itself. Okay? And then the last reason we communicate is self-presentation. Okay? I have a friend of mine who was an Alabama fan. He's an Alabama alumni. We get along great. But he has to, as part of his self-presentation, he wants to distance himself from the nut job Alabama fans that are out there. So he will routinely introduce himself. He goes, yeah, I'm an alumni of the University of Alabama, but I'm not one of those. Okay? So it's important to him to establish that. We communicate to establish ourselves and our roles within relationships, within groups. Sometimes we want to establish ourselves as the stern parent, even at work. When I was managing a team, I at one time managed a team of 15 people that were all under the age of 32. And yes, somebody asked me, where did you learn your management style? And I said, I've got 2 teenage children. This is the same thing we're working with here. Okay? We want to establish ourselves as the compassionate leader or the compassionate boss. We may want to establish ourselves as the good friend. And again, within an appropriate role. Friend I've had, we pledged our fraternity together at Auburn. It wasn't one of those fraternities, it was a military fraternity. Eric and I have known each other since August of 1980. Dear Lord, I shouldn't have said that out loud. Okay? Eric, when my father passed away, Eric was living in D.C. My father's funeral was in Birmingham. He showed up at the viewing without any notification. Walked up out of nowhere and said, hey, I am so sorry. Your dad was a great guy. That kid, was it calculating? No. But that was self-presentation as a good friend. Okay? So those are some of the reasons why we communicate. What you need to remember about communication, and we're not going to delve into this too much today. 2 weeks from now, when we get to chapter 8, we're going to go into it in detail. But all interpersonal communication happens in the context, and really not just the context, but the confines of culture. The larger culture, which in many ways will define the very nature of our interpersonal communication. Our relationship culture will determine how we can communicate about relationships that we are in, want to be in, or want to expose to the general population. We can have relationship storytelling, idioms, routines, rituals. Okay? An idiom and we're talking about relationship culture. This is the culture within our interpersonal community. We're not talking writ large yet. That's in chapter 8. This is just within the relationship culture. An idiom is an inside meaning that gives a sense of belonging. Okay? I was sitting around with my some people that I did not know very well, and they were just, they would occasionally say adjustable wrench. And to them, that was absolutely hilarious. And there'd be 6 people going like, yeah, it's an adjustable wrench. And everybody would go, hey, yeah, adjustable wrench. And I'm like sitting there going, I am not part of this group. But when they come to find out, none of the people that were there that were still in that group were there when whatever the adjustable wrench story was actually happened. They weren't even sure why they were saying it. But the fact was, they had this little inside joke that showed you were part of the group. When they said adjustable wrench, everybody would go, yeah. When I became part of that group, they told me, yeah, we don't know why we say it. It's just a thing we've been doing for a long time. Okay, that's fine. We have routines. We have routines that give predictability. And more importantly, our routines can communicate to the people we are involved in relationships with when things aren't normal. When I came back from my Iraq deployment, my kids that was 2005, so my kids would have been 8 and 11. And Friday nights at our house for a long time, used to be what we call bar food night, where we would go get potato skins and chicken wings and pizza roll-ups. And you go to the frozen food section of we were in Texas, so it was the H-E-B. Okay, the H-E-B is the Kroger of Texas. And you would get every bad food out of the freezer section. And then we would go home and we would make all this bad food. We would watch some TV, watch a movie that everybody agreed on. And at some point in time, Friday night dance party would ensue. Somebody would start throwing CDs into the CD. Yes, it was the CD player, not an iPad or an iPod. Okay? And we would all start the Friday night dance party and everybody would dance. When I came back from Iraq, not in the mood for the Friday night dance party again for a little while. We had to make some trips. We went on a vacation, so we kind of broke that routine. But when we got back to the house, first Friday night, I wasn't even thinking about it. I don't remember what we ate, but it wasn't bar food. We were still kind of on the list of things I hadn't had since I'd gone. But what I found out much later on was my 8-year-old and my 11-year-old were very worried that we were not having Friday night dance parties. Okay, and let me be honest. You can look at me. Friday night dance party was oftentimes preceded by Friday night happy hour. Okay? 2 or 3 weeks later, my wife took it upon herself to bring in a ton of bar food on Friday night, and Friday night dance party sort of happened organically. And so it communicated to everybody in the house that we are now returning back to normal. Okay? So the lack of that routine happening became very important to the family. Okay? There are rituals. Rituals. These are more symbolic things usually associated with significant events like holidays. Okay? When I was a kid growing up, my grandparents lived on the other end of Jefferson County. So we would drive, we would do our Christmas thing, have the Christmas dinner. 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we would load into the car and over the hills and through the woods, literally to grandmother's house we'd go. And we would stay there until 10:30, 11 o'clock, then we'd go back home. My brother and I used to hate that. Because you know what you don't take with you in the car to go see all your cousins on Christmas Day? You don't take your daggone Christmas presents. So it required, and all my cousins lived within a block of my grandma. They all lived literally within a quarter mile of each other. 5, 6 different houses. All my cousins had all their toys, And so I had to go play with their toys, which they did not want me to do because, well, they're kind of jerks, but let's not get into that right now. Okay, but that was a ritual. And we all within our relationships establish rituals. I have a friend of mine I went to graduate school with back in the prehistory of the 1980s. And we still exchange letters at Christmas. It's a ritual that sort of defines, it is our relationship, really. Okay? And then finally, we have rules and norms. Rules and norms. Now, by a rule and a norm, what we're talking about is things that regulate the daily function and can put boundaries on safe communication. Okay? Go back to my sailor. Dude, we don't talk about that. You may talk about that with your buddies, but we do not talk about that because I am your boss. Okay? And there are, off-limit subjects for everyone. Anytime I hear somebody go, there's nothing we can't talk about. What that says to me is there's some things you haven't gotten to yet. I don't know that I'm keeping any secrets from my wife. I can't think of anything. And I don't think she's keeping any from me. But there are subjects that we just don't talk about. Why? Because they are things that we don't need to talk about, and to bring them up would just cause problems. Pain, conflict. Okay? I know some friends of ours, both husband and wife, have sleep issues. And they have a tendency to wake up in the middle of the night, and they don't wake up very quickly. And so one of the rules they established was anything you say after you go to bed and before the alarm clock goes off, you cannot hold against each other. Because they may wake up talking some crazy stuff. So their rule and norm is they don't hold things like that against each other. How we found out about that is the weirdest. We're not gonna talk about that. Okay? Now, within every relationship, once you get past the most superficial levels of the relationship, you are going to have to deal with conflict. It is unavoidable. Usually this happens when the perceived goals in the relationship between the participants are no longer compatible or are not compatible. Conflict is inevitable. And a lot of people, and we're going to talk about this in a minute, avoid conflict at all costs. But conflict, if you go all the way back to Aristotle, like we have so many times, he thought that thesis and antithesis come together for synthesis, for growth, for renewal. Okay, let me tell you guys what's going on. So we're having vaccinations on campus today, and all the people that are getting vaccinated, which are all, they're vaccinating the people over 70 at this point. They all come by here and see me standing in an empty room talking and gesturing. And they come by, and this is what happens. They're all walking by going. So that's what I've been seeing all day. Okay, so where were we? Conflict. The key isn't necessarily to avoid conflict, because conflict is going to happen. The key is to manage it effectively. And we usually do that by establishing cultural norms, both relationship norms within the relationship culture, okay? This is how we fight. And a lot of times when you go to couples therapy, there will be a discussion on establishing the rules of how you fight. All right? I've already told you guys a lot about my marriage. I don't mind. I don't try to hide it. Within our rules, I never mention her mother, and she never mentions that I'm from Alabama. Because when we got into the relationship, she didn't think of me as the guy from Alabama. She thought of me as a guy from Alabama who had gotten the hell away from it and didn't understand that I really love the state of Alabama and I love people from Alabama. There's a lot wrong with it, but I do love being an Alabamian. Right now, working, in some way, I really like being a South Carolinian. Okay? And there was a perception on my part for years that if she started talking about me being an Alabamian in a fight, she was insulting me. Calling me a stupid redneck, basically. She's admitted that many times when we did that, she was. On the other hand, I know that my wife and her mother do not have a good relationship. I and my mother-in-law have a horrible relationship. So anytime I brought up her mother in a fight, it was going to be taken as me attempting to hurt her and cause pain. So within our relationship culture and managing conflict, those are things we don't talk about. That's how we manage our conflict effectively. So now go to your book, not right now, but afterwards, go to your book, figure 6.1, 6.1, however you want to say it, has different management styles, okay? And it establishes it in terms of concern for yourself and concern for others. Take a look at it. I will be using information from that on the final. So you need to look at it. I do have at least one question that I'm working on that will be on the final from figure 6.1. But let's start talking about some different conflict styles. There's competition. Competition. Competition is exactly what it sounds like. You're trying to win. Okay? There's avoidance. Oh, that's better. No, it turned out actually to be worse. There's avoidance, where you are just trying to maintain harmony and not actually deal with the issues that are causing the conflict. Now, again, is one better than the other? Again, it's a cultural issue. In some cultures, conflict avoidance is the number one goal. And you are esteemed for your ability to avoid conflict. In our culture, oftentimes, conflict avoidance will operationalize itself as passive-aggressive behavior. Okay? Sure, we'll do it your way. That's fine. I don't care. Really, what difference does it make how? We'll just go ahead. Yeah, your way is fine. Then they go, well, hold on a second. Why does this piss you off? And you're like, it doesn't piss me off. We're doing it your way, aren't we? How could we be pissed off? Okay? All right? So avoidance. There's accommodation. Accommodation. And that is where you just go along. It is oftentimes seen as being very passive or being very submissive, but it is oftentimes a very good strategy if you want to achieve a long-term victory. So these aren't necessarily conflicting. Competition and accommodation can go hand in hand. Absolutely. If I'm going to give you this one so that later on I can get one back from you, that's where they complement each other. Okay? There's compromise. Where you don't get everything you want and the person you're working with does not get everything they want. Okay? It should be seen as a win-win. Some people will see compromise as a lose-lose. Well, rather than you giving up something and me giving up something, why don't we just do it my way? That way I get everything I want, and then we'll take care of your needs later on. Okay? That is not a compromise. Then one of the ones that we really like to stress is collaboration. Collaboration. You're not trying to win. Everybody needs to be flexible. You want to separate people and personalities from the problem. You need to identify common grounds. And you also need to listen carefully to everyone to make sure that everyone's needs are understood within the confines of the conflict so that you try to come to some sort of resolution that meets most people's needs. Are you ever going to be able to collaborate on a solution that's going to meet everybody's needs? No, you're not. But through collaboration, you can at least come close. Clearly, collaboration and compromise go hand in hand. And again, you could still be collaborating and compromising and still have an overarching style of competition where, yeah, I'm going to give you this one, but I'm going to want it back later on. What we all need to be aware of, and what we all need to watch for is conflict patterns. Okay? Like serial arguing. That could be anything from as simple as they come back from lunch and they're always grumpy. What's going on with that? I had a boss that would go to lunch and come back argumentative as hell. What we found out, what we learned over time was he was an angry drunk and he was going out and drinking a lot at lunch. He used to go to this restaurant near where we worked. And back in the old days where you could smoke in a restaurant, they would bring you, when you ordered a bourbon and Coke, they would bring you a 6-ounce glass of bourbon and a big glass of ice and a 10-ounce bottle of Coke. They used to sell Cokes in these little round glass bottles. And so he would used to come in and put those 4 Coke bottles on at our coffee mess if anybody wanted a Coke. And then one day we sat around and figured out that he was knocking back 24 ounces of bourbon every day at lunch. Okay, and he would come back and he was just an angry drunk. And that was a conflict pattern we became aware of. Serial arguing. There's one-upsmanship or one-upping the other person, where everybody's always striving to be on top. There's mind reading, where you assume somebody's going to say something and you make your assumption a fact. And you react to the assumption, not to what the other person is actually saying. But once we see this and once we understand what our conflict management strategies are, and we're looking for conflict patterns, we have to figure out how to get out of that conflict. And the only way to do that is through negotiations. Now, there are 5 steps to negotiations. Pre-negotiations, the opening, exploration, bargaining, and settlement. Sometimes settlement is referred to as the closing. Settlement. Can you see all of this? This is a great look for me right here. Okay, yeah, you can see them all. All right, so we have 5 steps in negotiations. Pre-negotiations is where you sort of set the time and place for where you're going to have the negotiation at. A lot of times, pre-negotiations will be very short. You want to talk about this now? Now, in the car, fine, let's talk about this now. Or, hey, listen, if it's a work-related thing, listen, tomorrow at noon, I want to sit down and have a conversation with you about this. Okay. Hey, I've set up a video teleconference for tomorrow afternoon at 3:30. Can you be there for that? Yeah, be great. So in pre-negotiations, you're setting the time and the place. You also take that opportunity to define the limits of the conflict. Okay, we're not going to solve all the problems between our two teams, but I have been noticing we're fighting a lot over desk space. So let's get together tomorrow at 9 o'clock and sort out who has what desk and get this resolved. So you've set the time and the place, and you've also defined the nature of the conflict and what you're going to be negotiating over. The opening's where you set the tone, okay, and you identify common ground. Now remember, in a negotiation, you're not going to get everything you want, and you're not there to prove a point and to establish dominance. Some people are. Okay, that's not really a negotiation, that's a dictation. So if you walk into a negotiation and your opening gambit is, listen, you rat bastard, I've had enough and I'm not going to take it anymore. That is not a good negotiation strategy. Opening the opening, set the tone. Hey, listen, how many people you got on your team? 9. I've got 11 on mine. We've got, 16 desks. We need to set up some sort of equitable distribution. We all want our people, as many people as we can get in desks, so we're not running around looking for empty desks every day. Okay, so let's just come to some sort of amicable agreement. Okay? So set the tone and identify common grounds. Exploration is where you begin exchanging information. Okay? Where you begin to look at the entire problem. Hey, listen, I know you've got 11 people on your team and I've got 9, but all 9 of my guys come in during the mornings. I've noticed like 4 or 5 of your guys don't come in until noon, which is when most of my guys are going home. Oh, so now we've got a new opening. We've exchanged some information. Now we've got an opportunity to better utilize some resources. During bargaining, we make proposals and concessions. Okay, listen. What if I give you desk 1 through 5 all day? They're yours. I will take desk 10 through 6. Okay? You can have desks 6 through 10 or 6 through 9, those 4 desks. You can have those from when the office opens at 5 until noon, and I will take those 5 desks until noon until the office closes. It's 7. How's that sound? Is that an amicable distribution? Okay? And then in settlement, you make the agreement, you summarize all the results, and here's a very key one for settlement. You figure out some way to document it. If it's a relationship between you and a friend, documentation may just be, okay, listen, this is what we agreed on. If it's a more professional, non-personal relationship, somebody needs to sign a contract. If it's an informal relationship at work, I advise people all the time, when you have a conversation with somebody at work about something that's the least bit contentious, as soon as you finish that conversation between 2 people, you send them an email summarizing what was said. And this thing about the desk is literally a recitation of a conflict I had at work one time. Okay? Hey, Bob. Appreciate sitting down with you today. I really think we covered a lot of good ground. I appreciate the fact that you need all your desk from 5 in the morning to noon. And I think you understand now that I need all of my desk from noon until 5 o'clock, and then I need some additional desk until 7:30 or 8. And the agreement we came up with is that desk 1 through 5 are yours all day. You also have access to desk 6 through 9 until noon. I get desk, and then you send it to them and say, listen, if this is not what you remember, please let me know. That way, if it comes back, you've got documentation to say, no, we settled on this. Okay? That formalizes that agreement. Again, within, your buddies. Hey, listen, guys, we all agreed I wasn't going to go out and drink beers all night Sunday night after the football game. I got to go to work at 4:30 the next morning. That was what we agreed on. That was what we settled on, was that I got to pull the plug at 10 o'clock so I could go home and go to bed. Okay? And it could be that informal. But you do need to at least you document, even if it's only verbally, document the nature of the agreement. Now, one of the things we have to talk about when it comes to relationships are emotions. All right, this is going bad. All right, let me try this. Did I try this one here? Oh, I got two others. Hold on a second. Be patient. I'm trying to make life better for you guys. Ooh. This one's good. Yes, the life of an Aiken Technical College instructor. You get very excited about good dry erase markers. Okay? Yeah, it's not that much better, but hey. Emotions. We've all got them. We may not want them, but we do have them. There's two different types of emotions that we're going to talk about. Primary emotions and secondary. Our primary emotions are innate emotions. They happen very fast. They usually are emotions that we experienced separate from all other. We only experience one of these emotions at a time. Joy, fear, surprise, anger, sadness maybe not. Sadness kind of getting the borderline to secondary emotions. These are emotions that happen that fast, that come upon us very quickly. Okay? Most of them have, if you go back to our first lecture and you want to look at these, you can review them. Most, when we talk about nonverbal communication, these primary emotions have a corresponding facial expression that is very easy to understand. I mean, how many times have you heard the phrase, "You look angry"? You look upset. You look confused. Okay? You look like you're afraid of something. Secondary expressions are usually processed emotions. Things that we have some time to work with emotionally to sort of muddle through. They include things like embarrassment, shame, guilt, hate, pride, love. Okay? And we have trouble deciphering those facial expressions because they're not instinctive and innate. Confusion happens when we process things. Okay? Fear can turn to, what can it turn to? Okay, let me skip that. I always love it when I start a sentence, I have no idea how to finish. Secondary emotions are processed, but also you need to remember governing both of these are cultural norms. And again, that can be relationship cultures, or it can be the wider emotions or wider culture. Culture is going to dictate our display rules, how we can show emotion. Okay? What emotions are proper to express in public? How many of y'all have been involved in a romantic relationship? And this clearly is a rhetorical question because if you raise your hand, I'm never going to know. How many of y'all have been involved in romantic relationships where you and your partner are perfectly comfortable with public displays of affection, and then you go to meet their parents? Suddenly holding hands is not something where, hopefully you have this conversation before the event, and they don't jerk their hand away from you when you try to hold, or when you hold their hand, or when you put your arm around them, or it's happened in my case, with ultimately my wife. First time I met her parents, I was going to work. We'd been dating for several months, and usually as I headed out to work, because I was working nights at the time, I would give her a kiss on the way out the door. It became very quickly apparent to me as I started moving toward that, and her eyes got like this big, and she started freaking out that that was not going to happen. The relationship culture with her parents dictated that she did not show affection toward, a public display of affection toward her boyfriends. And not multiple boyfriends at the same time. I'm fairly confident I was the only one at the time. Okay? Yeah, cultural norm. I'm an Auburn University graduate 2 times. My oldest daughter's an Auburn University graduate. My youngest daughter is a Mississippi State graduate. We went to a Mississippi State Auburn football game in Starkville, Mississippi, at Davis Wade Stadium on the campus of Mississippi State. And that year, Auburn just beat the crap out of Mississippi State. It wasn't even close. I mean, it was like 33 to 6. Okay? First time we scored a touchdown, I said, yeah, Warrior! Woo! Second time we scored a touchdown, I went, yeah, Auburn Warrior, because I'm beginning to notice people are staring at me. After the third one, when we were up by 21 points, it became very clear that I should not be standing up and yelling anymore. There was a cultural imperative for me to shut my damn mouth. Okay? And we understand that in athletic competitions, when you're the visiting team and you're winning, culturally, we do not show those emotions, lest we feel negative repercussions. Okay? Then we have to talk about how we express emotions. Again, a lot of this is culturally driven. There is emotional sharing where we are expected to share emotions, but there's also what's called emotional contagion. Has anybody ever, and again, the best example is there's a dog movie, and again, my family, Marley and Me, that movie is banned from my household forever. I haven't actually seen it, but apparently the dog dies in the end. And I come home from working late, and all my wife and my 2 daughters are just shattered emotionally. And they said what happened was they were all doing pretty well until my youngest daughter just sort of gasped. And then like 3 seconds later, they're all just disintegrating emotionally. Okay? Yeah, that's a good movie in my opinion. Okay? So we do have emotional contagion, which can drive our expressions of emotions. All right, finally, let's discuss this one last idea, and that is self-disclosure. And then I'm going to challenge you with something. A lot of times we'll have people look at you and say, well, I'm completely honest, so I disclose things because I'm an open. No, you don't. Disclosing things is a way to manage the relationship. It is self-beneficial. Okay? Up to the point of self-disclosure is how we define our relationships. What am I willing to tell you? What am I obviously going to keep from you? Okay? Up to and including, you're walking down the hall. Hey, how you doing? Doing good. How are you? You've disclosed something and established the confines of that relationship. Have you disclosed a lot? No, not really. But you have at least established with this individual that you're willing to at least acknowledge their presence. Okay? You want to use self-disclosure to change the dynamic of that relationship and possibly end that relationship? Hey, how you doing? Dude, I'm going to have my gallbladder out next week. It sucks. Chances are that person's going to go, what the hell? And then if they see you again in the halls, they're going to go, hey, oh, that's the gallbladder guy. No, never mind. Just keep walking. Okay? What we disclose and how we do it is necessary in every relationship. And we do it for 2 reasons. One is social penetration. Social penetration. In social penetration theory, we disclose information in response to disclosures because we feel like we are forced to, or we make self-disclosures to force our partners to disclose of themselves. Okay? Hey, what'd you do this weekend? That's not going to get an answer. Oh, I did some stuff. Whew, man, I was barbecuing all weekend. I made some ribs. I made some brisket. Had some people over. Probably drank too many beers. Went swimming. Had a great time. What'd you do this weekend? Well, now that other person feels compelled to engage with you. I didn't do much. Just sat around and watched the movies. But really, what'd you watch? See, now you've already given more details than they have, so they are obligated, culturally, in our culture at least, to now give you information back. Now, social penetration works in different ways in almost every culture, but I will tell you, when I first moved to the United Kingdom, the English hated us Americans for that. I mean, they got used to it after a while because many of them have been working with Americans for years. But we'd come in and say, ooh, I saw a great movie this weekend. Let me tell you about it. And you would talk about it, and they'd sit there and they'd politely nod. And then you go, hey, what were you up to this weekend? And, eventually they would tell you, you know what, I'm not comfortable talking about that. Why do you Americans insist on asking what I did this weekend? Okay? Social penetration. We use self-disclosure to respond to disclosures from our relationship partners or to force self-disclosures from our relationship partners. Okay? Then there is social comparison. Social comparison. In social comparison theory, we evaluate ourselves based on disclosures of others, and sometimes we have to disclose in order to manage our self-perceptions of us within that relationship. We self-disclose in order to make comparisons of ourselves with other people we are in relationships with, and we will use self-disclosures to manage our self-perception within that relationship. Oh, wow. He's pretty proud of what he did this weekend. I'm going to have to put a little smackdown on him. Wow, you went out for dinner on Saturday night. I flew to Paris and had dinner with my wife for our anniversary. Take that. Okay? And no, it's not oftentimes. But have you ever felt like when somebody was talking about something great they'd done, where you felt compelled to talk about something great you'd done just to sort of level the playing field so it didn't seem like you were a loser? Okay? I'll be honest with you. That's one of my major personality flaws that my wife calls me on all the time, is I feel like I have to constantly keep up. I mean, I'm getting over it. It's a lot better now that I'm reaching very quickly my 6th decade on this planet, and I'm quickly beginning to learn that I'm not going to catch up with some people, and I don't care as much. But a lot of times, if we hear somebody bragging, we're going to have to brag right back just so we can stay even. Okay? There's 4 main categories of what we disclose. Observations, thoughts, feelings. Couldn't remember if it was feelings or emotions. Feelings and needs. Observations, things we've seen. Hey, that corner is very dangerous. Be careful when you're driving through there. Thoughts. I've been wondering why they did that. It seems to me like that was kind of stupid. Feelings. Dude, I hate that too. Man, that bothers me. And then needs. Hey, can I get a beer? Okay? Or I need a beer. Okay? the interpersonal communication process, third of the way through the semester, we finally get around to it. Now we've still got 2/3 of the way to go. I don't know what we're going to be talking about next. We'll figure something out. How long have I been at this? 55 minutes. It's a good length for a lecture. Hey, as always, I am open for emails. I can meet you here on campus with an appointment. And I will also be willing to Zoom with you, and I will set up an appointment for that. Just let me know. Anytime you want to talk, you can contact me. Again, principally, shoot me an email. Let me know that you want to talk. And if we can settle it over email, we will get together either through Zoom or on campus, and we'll have that conversation. Okay? All right. Keep up with your discussion boards. Stay safe, and we will see you soon.